Even to this day, everyone probably does agree. I've been looking at Reddit, I've been seeing all kinds of posts about it, and everyone does agree that Need for Speed Undercover was going to be one of the worst Need for Speed games, or perceived as one of the worst ones ever made, and some people even think it is the worst game that they have ever made. The reason for this, though, is why was Need for Speed Undercover so bad? I do want to talk about some articles I did end up finding to go over this a bit more, which is probably going to be a chain of disasters that did end up causing this game to be a disaster in itself. So after doing some research, though, I did end up finding some articles on Reddit and people discussing about Undercover, on why this game was bad and different things that really played a factor into it. And I did want to read through some of these and give my honest thoughts and talk about that as well. Guys, the first one here is going to be a post that's going to say, the sad thing is that EA, given BlackBox enough time, it could have been a great entry to the franchise. I mean, honestly, that kind of happens with a lot of games nowadays. If a lot of them weren't going to be rushed out, they'd probably be way better and they wouldn't feel like a DLC. You know what I'm saying? Test Drive Unlimited, Solar Crown, also Motorfest kind of felt like a DLC as well. And there is going to be plenty of other games that were going to be rushed out. Even Need for Speed Unbound obviously wasn't initially done. So yeah, that's going to be obvious and something that happened back then. With Need for Speed Undercover, that's happening currently now with new games, bro. Isn't that wild? But after that, though, there was also going to be multiple choice system that you could play. For example, you wanted to choose either to continue street racing or ditch your undercover cop job and will continue to infiltrate as a street racing syndicate by posing as a racer. Apparently, this system was specified to affect your overall gameplay, side, and story missions, but it was never fully executed. And this is something I did want to mention here, guys. Am I the only one that thinks that entire, like, I guess you could say campaign design sounds really dope, man? I wish they would do that in a new game, kind of like the old Fast and Furious. You know how he was going to be a cop, he did start hanging out with Dom and the crew and stuff like that, he got attached to him. What if that was going to be a storyline in a racing game like Need for Speed Undercover, right? Or even like a new Need for Speed game, like maybe you go in as like an undercover cop and you start really liking those people and stuff like that, then you start racing with them, you end up leaving the police, and then they start coming after you or something. I feel like something like that would be dope. On top of that, have decisions in the game that are probably going to affect what you were actually doing and stuff, and also maybe have other things in there that can like decimate or like mess one of the playthroughs up where you have to do another one. I don't know, man. There could be so many different ways they could do it. And speaking of that, with the things about the campaign, guys, I am going to admit there is going to be a couple of different things I liked about the campaign, which you will see in the background. You know what I'm saying? Besides those two little things there, which I think a lot of people are going to agree, especially playing this game and stuff like that back in the day and then seeing all that stuff, you know what I mean? But one thing that really confused me also with the campaign of Undercover, which kind of showed me that it was a bit confusing. Like, you start off in the game, guys, I am going to show this clip. You'll see the helicopters in the background, the police and all that, and then you're also then going to see the red Nissan 350Z, I think that is. Yeah, I think that's 350Z. You're going to start off in that car, you kind of go on the highway, you got to escape the cops and all that, and there's going to be like little cinematic stuff going on with the police blocking the road and stuff like that, and then pretty much out of nowhere you're then going to spawn into the NSX, or I guess you could say the SX, not the NSX, is it 240 SX to be exact. And I feel like a lot of people are like, wait, does this have to do with the campaign, or like was that going to be planned? Did they get rid of it? Did they bring it back? Or, you know, there's a lot of questionable things going on in this game that I feel like many people are like, wait, what, dude? Because you're going to start in that car, then you end up in the other car and stuff like that, and you're like, wait, so out of nowhere, there's going to be a cutscene, now I'm driving this car, so you can kind of tell that maybe some things were cut, and obviously things were going to be rushed out, which is going to be a whole nother problem in this game. I gotta admit, the other crazy part to me, though, is I'm not sure back then of how the development of these games actually worked, whether they were going to have multiple studios working on different games like we do see in a lot of the new games nowadays, right? You'll probably end up seeing like a studio like Ubisoft or even something like Nacon where they have KT Racing, and there's going to be other studios working on these said games in the same company. I do wonder back then how that did end up happening with BlackBox, with these other companies, because on Reddit, guys, I also found this other thing. I do want to read this off here, and again, I will have photos on the screen if you do want to see it, but this is going to read BlackBox were split into teams. During that period, a team worked on Need for Speed Pro Street 2007, a team worked on Skate 2007, and a team worked on Need for Speed Undercover, which came out in 2008. They got split up too much and rushed. Poor devs were on a crunch time. If Need for Speed Undercover had the whole studio on it, it would have been so much better. But then again, we could say that about every Need for Speed game starting from Carbon. Even that one was unfinished. What's kind of insane about that is I don't know how people are going to take this, guys. I want to say this straight up. Let me know your thoughts. But honestly, Need for Speed Carbon was kind of the downfall of Need for Speed, and even the downfall of BlackBox, am I right? Because they were starting to pump out Need for Speed games every single year, which obviously we could look at a franchise like Call of Duty, and that's going over so well for them, isn't it? Look at the yearly Call of Duty releases, man. That's doing so much for them, isn't it? Yeah, it is destroying the franchise. And we can probably all agree that seeing them putting out a game every year, they're not going to be able to fully have new ideas in it, try new stuff, and also probably fix some existing bugs or different things like that because the game's coming out again so dang quick that they're probably tweaking it, changing the skin in the game and some other stuff, and then, putting it all in there and stuff like that, which is probably also why Undercover was super buggy because they really couldn't fully work on the game. Apparently, this game was only in development for a year or so, and I'm going to guess and say Carbon, from what I saw online, was apparently 22 months, but we all also do know that game was also going to be very unfinished. It was also very quick, like 4 hours. So yeah, you could probably say the game most likely had a lot more thought behind it, but it just didn't initially get there. One thing that really does frustrate me, though, is if you were going to have the studio basically working on all of those games at once, we all do know Skate obviously did very well. I would actually say Skate probably did better than Need for Speed, at least maybe it did back then. I do think I saw something about Undercover doing like 13 million copies or something, which is not necessarily a good thing, because that is going to be 13 million people or so probably looking at this game going, dude, was this game finished, bro? Like, was it really done? I don't know. It doesn't look like it, so that might not necessarily be a good thing about it. And people might look at that and go, oh man, so yeah, this game is not finished. And you're going to start looking at other Need for Speed games. We all do know that Pro Street came out. And also with that, that is something I did want to mention, guys. On this exact same thread here, if you scroll down, I will show a screenshot of this as well. Someone did end up mentioning that the Skate team was mostly going to be EA Canada and EA Sports, guys. So they apparently had very little development in the overall development of Need for Speed Undercover, and that was mainly going to be BlackBox. But the thing about that is BlackBox was also going to be working on Pro Street, and they were also going to be working on Undercover, obviously both games there. And this is what this is going to say. They were split up a few months before PlayStation's release so that they could get a head start on Undercover, but this was only a relatively short period of time. They weren't stretched as thinly as people seem to think they were. If anything, Undercover was getting the favorite treatment here. What's kind of insane about that is they were probably putting a lot more time into this game than people probably thought, but it probably needed more time, most likely because they were like, oh, we want to do this and this, but we only have this short amount of time, probably because EA is giving them a deadline, so they couldn't do half the stuff. And they probably were working on Pro Street, trying to then get that game set up and stuff, and you could probably see the really bad cycle that is most likely going to happen here. Like, you can't be split between both projects of big games like that, because one game is probably going to suffer. In that case, both of them could. I would probably say Pro Street was going to be fairly solid. I did not see a lot of bugs and stuff in that game, and at least compared to Undercover, guys, I cannot believe the amount of bugs and just the imperfections and obviously the blooming and the graphics of this game, and it just honestly did not look all that great, and I even saw people saying that on PC and stuff like that. But if we really do think about it like that and noticing that this game really was going to have split teams and stuff on it, that is probably going to be a big issue, especially when that team is going to be trying to get something done on this game and then they're also going to be working on the other. That is probably going to be a sign of a disaster that this game is most likely going to release, and it's not going to be nearly as finished. What's insane, though, is even newer Need for Speed games kind of took a similar route, and they were going to be similar, but also in ways they could have been better, and most likely, had better post-content that, came out on that stuff. But we all do know we could have DLCs, and that's a whole different conversation. But either way, though, you kind of got to focus on getting a main game release first. That is not going to feel like a beta or have other issues before you initially try to do other things with it. Like, get that game finished, bro, and make sure it's not going to feel like a beta, like Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown. I also did end up seeing another piece of article, guys, I did want to show here. Let me know your thoughts on this one. It is going to read, because of EA, which split BlackBox into 3 dev teams to work on Need for Speed Pro Street. Again, with the previous comment saying it was going to be the sport team. Let me know your thoughts on that or additional information, because I really am interested in this kind of stuff to see how a lot of this did end up undercovering. I'm sorry, that was terrible. But either way, though, it's then going to say Need for Speed Pro Street, Need for Speed Undercover, and Skate on top of tight deadline meets. The 2 Need for Speed titles were failures at launch, while Skate was a success. The same occurrence happened twice with the new Criterion in March 2021 and September 2023 due to the Battlefield franchise. So again, let me know your thoughts on this, guys. This is kind of wild. We all do know Need for Speed Unbound was obviously not what it was supposed to be when it did end up coming out, which was most likely because of Battlefield. Now, yes, the post content on the game was obviously great, and it had some of the best updates compared to pretty much any other racing game, but when you are going to have a launch like that, then you kind of don't have a choice to make sure the game is going to be good. Other people also got upset how there was DLCs that were like $15 and stuff, and different things on the game for skinned cars or different body kits and different things. You were also going to be buying all the packs, which AK were going to be like the vehicle packs, and then you were also then going to have like the vehicle pass thing that was also in the game. And then afterwards they ended up having the ultimate collection thing, which was 15 bucks, that got you literally everything. So all the people that were spending money on there, that was probably going to be way above that. Someone said it was like $100 or something if you bought everything before then. I really don't know how true that is, but either way, you could probably see like the overall domino effect that even the new games are facing that Undercover seem to end up having, which is honestly going to be very sad. With that being said, though, as I did mention earlier, though, there's also going to be the article where they did end up having the interview thing with BlackBox about Need for Speed Undercover. So here is going to be the thing, guys. BlackBox last Need for Speed game, Need for Speed Undercover, didn't perform well with critics. What have you done since then to ensure this year's game doesn't suffer the same fate? It is then going to read, no one's proud of Undercover, it was not a good game. That's honestly wild. That is the first thing that is said, bro. It is then going to say it sold well, so at the same time, I'll say you don't sell 13 million units for nothing. But you know, this year the team is driven to quality. The next part is then going to read, I think our challenge is going to be an internal challenge. We've got Undercover, obviously, which we want to say isn't the type of game we make, and we have a talented team. That for me right there is basically saying that, yo, we did end up making Undercover, but this is probably not the game we did end up having in our vision. This is probably not what we really wanted to do, but with the overall deadlines of what EA was doing and stuff like that, I'm guessing that BlackBox probably didn't have a choice, and that is also why Undercover is still going to be one of the worst Need for Speeds. And what's insane though is it's even going to be a bad game, it seems, in their eyes as well. Isn't that kind of crazy, guys? Do let me know your thoughts on this in the comments below. Also, do let me know your thoughts on Need for Speed Undercover. Basically everything I have seen. Don't get me wrong, some people are going to like the game. Again, the customization is good. And on top of that, it was also going to have a pretty dope car list, which seems to be kind of the biggest points about the game. But the issue with that, though, is if you're not going to be the biggest fan of the handling, then how exactly is a car list going to be all that interesting? I also want to say here as well, I am going to make a video talking about the black box era of Need for Speed games. I am going to go back and play Underground 2 and also Underground 1, and I'm also planning on going back in and playing Most Wanted 2005. Once I can go through and play a lot of these games, guys, I am going to do like a history timeline of black box and stuff. For example, me talking about Need for Speed Carbon, Need for Speed Most Wanted 05, Underground 2, seeing the amazing effects of those racing games that they even have today. And then on top of that, though, going down the line and seeing how other games were, like Need for Speed Carbon, also Need for Speed Pro Street, we're then going to have something like Need for Speed Undercover. So yeah, there is going to be a pretty interesting timeline there. On top of that, one of the last Need for Speed games they did end up making was Need for Speed The Run. So again, guys, I will talk about that in a future video. Guys, do let me know your thoughts on Need for Speed Undercover in the comments below. Also, what do you guys think was the overall downfall of Need for Speed Undercover? I am curious, and once again, I am going to be making a video in the future about black box and stuff like that in the Need for Speed era, at least back in the day when they were making the games. To be honest, Need for Speed Undercover definitely had a lot of issues, and what's insane is you could still see that in a lot of newer games nowadays.